What's up guys, Drake Kelch here, and we're back with another video. I'm actually really excited about this video because we're talking about the BlackMagic Pyxis 6K. All right, so like I mentioned, we are talking about the brand new BlackMagic Pyxis 6K, and I'm really excited about this camera. Price point and specs wise, it's pretty awesome, and it compares really well to a lot of cameras, so let's dive into it. They have 3 different models that they're selling: the EF mount, the L mount, and the PL mount. The EF and L are $3,000, and the PL mount is $3,200. I kind of have a theory on why they went L mount. I don't know for sure, but my guess is for people like us who are doing a lot of different shoots using a lot of different lenses, you want to be able to use an EF like DSLR lens, or you want to be able to use a big cinema lens like this, which is PL mount. And EF, there isn't a good way to really adapt EF to PL, at least in my experience, and they didn't go RF, but the L mount lets you adapt to EF and PL really well. And so for us, I think the L mount is actually a great option. If you're only using EF lenses, awesome. If you're only using PL lenses, awesome, but there's no interchangeable lens mount. The body is basically a small Ursa. So they have a screen on the side. It does not fold, but you have mounting points at the top and at the bottom. And then on the back, you have your 2-pin power, and it's a 2-pin LEMO. And then you also have a BPU battery slot. Now, the battery BPUs aren't the greatest, especially powering a camera like this. On a BPU 20, we got about 20 minutes of record time on the battery. But on a 95 watt-hour V-mount battery that we just detapped into the camera, we got about 2 hours of record time on the V-mount. So I'd highly recommend that. There isn't a lot of products on the market for this camera specifically yet, but I'm assuming Wooden Camera and Tilta and all of the companies are gonna come out with their own battery option to put a V-mount on the back of it. For now, we've just been using either a Ronin or a 15 mil V-mount plate and then detap it into the camera, and it works really good. One thing to note about power is because it's just the BPU and the 2-pin LEMO, there's no way to power accessories off of the camera unless you put a V-mount battery on it. So as you can see, we're running a monitor and some other stuff on here, and it's all powered from this V-mount that we put on the side just for this video. Typically wouldn't run it on the side, but again, there's no way to power anything off of the camera. As far as outputs go, you have a couple options. You have your SDI out on the back, and that allows you to plug in any monitor like this. You can run 12G 4K out of the SDI port, really, really nice. And then BlackMagic has a couple ways to monitor this camera. First being the screen on the side. It's a great option to have, so you can walk up to your camera, see what's going on, and go through the menu, all that stuff right here. Secondly, like I mentioned, the SDI port. And then they also sell a viewfinder and a monitor specifically for the Pyxis, which gives you touchscreen and viewability on that monitor. But there's another way that we just discovered. The USB-C port on the front of the camera here, it says viewfinder, and it's meant for the viewfinder and it's meant for the Pyxis monitor. But with the right dongle, you can actually go USB-C to HDMI, which we have sitting right here, into the monitor HDMI, and it actually works really well. Okay, so I had to interject a little input here. Since recording the video, as soon as we turned off the camera, I have not been able to get that USB-C dongle to work, and I've tried about 8 to 10 more dongles off of Amazon, and I haven't got it to work reliable at all. So I actually would not say that this is a reliable option anymore. Maybe BlackMagic's blocking it. Maybe they'll come out with an update, but yeah, we'll see. As of now, I would not use this option. Now, not all dongles work. We had to try several to get this to work, so I will link this dongle in the description so you can get that if you're interested. But it's a really cool option to have your monitor in 1080p and still send 4K SDI to your broadcast room or your truck or whatever. It's a really cool option. Obviously you won't have the touchscreen control, but you do have your controls right here. Menu system is basically exactly the same as all the other Blackmagic cameras, Ursus Pockets, whatever. Same menu system there. As far as I/O goes, you have an 1/8 inch audio jack on the back, and then on the very front here, you have a XLR for, it's a mini XLR for a bigger shotgun mic. It does provide 48 volt phantom power as well. So you have the option to run a bigger microphone. And then the second SDI port is for time code and sync. One of the big downfalls, I think, of this camera was if you're running a Blackmagic ecosystem that is using camera control on the return SDI, that no longer works on the Pyxis. That SDI port is for time code and Genlock only, which is kind of a bummer that you can't just plug it into your existing ecosystem with that program SDI. I feel like that was a major oversight. Hopefully that gets fixed with an update, so we'll see. But if you want camera control, you have 2 ways to do it. The easiest way is this Cat5 port right here. You can plug a Cat5 cable right into the camera, and that is how you gain control of the camera over the network. Also, what that gives you is streaming. So this camera lets you stream right to YouTube or other sources if you want to. And what's cool is you can actually do YouTube, SRT, and RTMP. Very, very fancy. Sorry, let's go back here. You have a bunch of different providers: Boxcast, Vimeo, Restream, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, all those in the menu there. So that's really cool if you wanted to stream right to a source and you don't want a switcher and you have one camera. It's a really cool option. And with that network control, you can also do camera to cloud. So if you're using Frame.io and that whole workflow of loading your proxies or your raw footage, this allows you to do it right from the camera. Some cameras you need an add-on, but this lets you do it right from the camera, which is sick. And then lastly, on the back, there is one more USB-C port, which you can't see because my monitor is blocking it, but that allows you to record. You can record to the SSD, and if you want to, you can also use the zoom and focus demands that Blackmagic offers. So if you're running a Canon compact servo lens and you want to use the zoom demand and focus demand that Blackmagic uses, you can do that with that USB-C port on the back there. Talking about recording, you can record to an SSD. That's a great option. You also have 2 CFast Express ports on the back here, so dual card slots. Again, sorry, my monitor's in the way, but you can record to the CFast Express cards there. Record times, so you have a few options. You have 6K open gate, which is the actual 4/3 sensor, so not a 6K crop of your sensor, which is really cool. We did a music video of that, which we'll show you footage of, but 6K, 16:9, 4K, 1080p. It's 6K up to 30 frames, 4K up to 60 frames, and 1080 up to 120 frames per second. So if you're looking for a high speed, high frame rate camera, this probably isn't your camera, but it does give you the option if you need it. It only records RAW. That is a really funny thing to me. I wish it had ProRes and I wish it had an H.264 option. Sometimes you don't need RAW. You just want that quick delivery, H.264 or ProRes, depending on your editor. The RAW only is kind of crazy. I hope that they update that and add ProRes at least to this menu. And then you have your bit rates all the way down to 12:1. On a 512 card at 12:1 6K, you get about 2 hours of record time. And then it also is recording proxies to that card. So we recorded a full card in 6K and it gave us about 8 gigs of 1080p proxies as well. So that's a really cool feature to have, that you can record proxies at the same time. There's no ND filters built into this camera. So if you are expecting NDs, it's not there. The Ursa has NDs, but the Ursa is a bigger body and costs more money. Mounting wise, I think that this camera has quite a few good options. You have 1/4-20s and 3/8 on the top and bottom, just like the Ursa does. And then they make this plate that you can buy at 60 bucks. It goes on the side, adds more 1/4-20s and a rosette on the side. Very, very handy. You can buy a cage. There's people like Wooden Camera and 8sin and Condor Blue that are making cages for this. It does add more mounting and a little bit more protection, but for me, this is kind of all the mounting that I typically would need, having all these 1/4-20s and 3/8 on the top, and then that rosette on the side for a side handle is kind of perfect for my setup, but you might want a cage maybe to do portrait mode or something like that. Now that we got all of the specs out of the way of this camera and what it can do, what you really want to know is how does it compare image-wise? What does it look like? Well, we got to use it on a few shoots. We used it on a shoot mixing in other Komodos. We used it on a shoot on its own using the 6K open gate feature and running it on a Ronin 2. And then we did some tests here in the shop against Komodo. Now, you guys, if you watch the channel, you probably know that I use reds, specifically Komodos, a lot, which is why I keep referencing Komodos and compared it to Komodos. We're not gonna get rid of the Komodos and we're still gonna use them, but I'm always curious to see how other cameras stack up. So on its own, it definitely looks good. I think it is improved from the Ursa and the pockets. If you've heard me talk about pockets in the past, I don't really like how they look, and I know you might think differently, but I don't love the pocket look. So I think this is definitely an improvement, a little bit more of the Ursa look, but I would say less crushed, a little bit more cinematic than like an Ursa would be, which is really nice. Ursas can tend to be a little bit on the more broadcasty side of a look, if that makes sense. But the skin tones look really nice and soft. We did some tests with harsh lighting, as you can see here, and the skin tone actually looks pretty good still, even in the harsh lights. The color tends to veer a little bit more green, especially if you're looking at it compared to a Komodo, which always is like magenta shifty a little bit. But overall, I think comparison-wise, it looks really good. As you can see in this test footage here, that 6K full frame sensor looks really, really good in this music video that we shot. All natural light, no artificial lighting, so the grade actually held together pretty well. I think where you will see it fall apart a little bit is in the highlights, and I think that you see any camera fall apart in the highlights. So in our comparison with Komodo, you can see that the detail kind of gets lost when there's a lot of light pointing right in the sensor. But one of the things that it does really well is it does not bloom. I hate it when cameras bloom in the highlights, or sometimes some Sonys, it almost turns pure white in the highlights if it's too much, and this camera does not do that, so that is a plus for this camera. I still think the edge goes to Komodo or any red in the highlights, which is why we use them a lot when you're shining a lot of light right into the sensor. This camera does have some rolling shutter. That is something to be aware of. Now, on this screen here, it definitely looks much worse than it would on the output. It doesn't look as bad on the output or on the actual card when we've tested this in the past. This screen, again, is just not really good, and the rolling shutter looks crazy bad. But as you can see in this test footage here that we shot, you can see it, but it's not horrible. Now, when you're tracking a subject like we're tracking Andrew here in this example, you can slightly see it, but it's less noticeable because you're focused on the subject. You're mainly seeing it on the racks. It kind of warp a little bit. Now, something like a Komodo is gonna have a global shutter, so you're not gonna get any of that rolling shutter. That's kind of an advantage of having that. So something to be mindful of is if you wanna run a Pyxis on, say, a cable cam or a dolly that's going really fast, you are going to have to play into that rolling shutter, and you won't be able to do as crazy of moves per se as you could with a Komodo because you can catch that rolling shutter. So you're gonna have to play into how the shutter is rolling. Now, comparing this guy to other cameras, it's kind of in a ballpark of its own, and Blackmagic is known for doing this. They come out with a camera with crazy specs at a cheap price point. So $3,000 for the specs is kind of crazy. Comparison-wise, there's not a lot in that range. There's Komodo, which is $5,000. There's the C80, which is $5,500, and there's the FX3, which is $3,700. So the FX3 kind of comes in the closest. It is a 4K full frame sensor. It does record 4K 120, so if you want that high frame rate, it's really nice. C80, 6K full frame, 4K 120, so again, better high speed. And then the Komodo has 0 high speed capabilities, as it's 6K 40 and 4K 60, and then like 1080, 120, if that. I don't even remember, but I don't ever use this for high frame rate, so I don't even think about it. One of the things to think about with this camera though is that It does not have autofocus, kind of like Komodo. I know it has autofocus, but I tell people you can't rely on the autofocus of the Komodo at all. So no autofocus. If you need autofocus, Sony and Canon are your cameras, just like I'm using a A7S III for this because it has autofocus. So to wrap all that up, I think the Pyxis is honestly a great option. It has a ton of features. It packs a lot of punch. The image quality is really good. I think you could easily make it look like your other Blackmagic cameras if you're wanting to introduce it into that ecosystem. You could mix it with Komodos, though it will take a lot more work to mix it with Komodos. But if you're looking for a brand new camera ecosystem to upgrade to, whether that's for shoots or live streaming, I think that this camera adds a great value because you can use it as a cinema camera and you can use it as a broadcast camera. So honestly, for $3,000, I don't have a lot to complain about. Even the lack of NDs and the rolling shutter, it's still $3,000, and this at $5,000 doesn't have NDs either. So I think that's nothing to be discouraged about. I think it is a great option of a camera. And lastly, if you have any questions and you'd like me to test it out on this camera, feel free to drop it in the description below. And really exciting to wrap up the year, we're actually going to be giving away this camera. So if you're looking for a new camera and you want to be entered into the giveaway, check out the link in the description below and it'll explain all the details of how to get entered into the giveaway to get this exact camera right here. Thank you guys for watching. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next video.